Hello and welcome. My name is Sean Glumace. I'm an Adobe Education leader, and I've been working in the comic book industry for almost 15, 16 years now. Actually, might be a little longer than that. And for most of my career, even though I have a background in illustration and graphic design, I've been a letterer. So I started hand lettering many years ago, and I moved over to Adobe Illustrator pretty early on in my career to actually start lettering comic books. And so what is a letterer to start off with? And basically it's the person who draws all the word balloons and sets all the type in the comic book. So we actually bring the dialogue to life, and it's a very important part of the process, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is not just lettering but the entire comic book process. And it's a lot like graphic design when let's say we're preparing a catalog or a magazine for production, but there are some little things that are different and they're unique to this industry as well, including sizes, fonts, and how we approach the process too. And so, like I said, I started out hand lettering, and when I moved over to the computer to actually do the typesetting, the lettering, I already had a background in graphic design. And so the process that I used was we bring all of our artwork in through Photoshop that is colored, then we make it a TIFF, CMYK, 300 DPI. We then work on top of that in Illustrator and create a EPS file. Then we used to put the two of them together in Quark Express or PageMaker and then get that off to the printer. And that process hasn't changed much. It's just a few little things, one being InDesign now instead of Quark, and also I don't convert my files to EPS anymore. I leave them as Adobe Illustrator files. That way I don't have to have a working file and a production file. I can just have the one set to work with. And so that's the process I'm going to talk about here. And I'm also going to throw in the pre-artwork process, and I think it's a good place to start. And all the files that you need are downloadable. I have them in as a zip. You'll have the link here for Comic Book Lettering Project. And inside that folder, once you unzip it, is a set of lettering templates that I've created in Adobe Illustrator. These are just pages that are set up to standard US comic book size. If you're somewhere else in the world, you might have different sizes. Japan has different sizes, most of Asia, including Europe and their comic book industry as well. So if you're doing an American standard size comic book, which is really a 32-page comic book, we have everything set up for you here, and that's what I use when I letter. And we have our InDesign file as well that's already set up, same exact size. And then we have a script, and so that's what we're looking at right here. And then our working files. So we have some AI files, and we have some TIFF files as well. So as we start working, we're going to be pulling all these things together into one, but we always start with the script. And this is an actual book that I worked on. It's called Vigilante Project, thanks to Chris Dickens, who is the creator and the writer on this. And I worked on the entire project. We ended up doing 4 issues plus a few pickup stories, which ended up becoming a graphic novel. So it was around 120 pages total. And I came on board. They had artwork done. They had some lettering, but I went back through and re-lettered one entire book and then lettered everything all the way through. And so this is how I get the script. So I get a PDF or a Word document, and he's got this set up, and I've hacked off all the other pages we don't need. But taking a look here, what he does is he writes a description, and he has dialogue. So who says it, what's going on. So in this case, the panel 7.1, the first panel on the page. And we're talking about sequential art. Just to give you an idea, I do have this page open. So I'll kind of put them side by side here. So this is the finished artwork. And you can see here a transit cop enters the fray. He's carrying a PR4 side handle baton. Looks a lot like a tonfa. And then hot chick notices, and there's swoosh. So I have to add that in. And there's some dialogue here as well. And then she warns the rest of the group, cops. And there's a lot of SFX, which is your special effects, and then we have dialogue. So I have to go through this and fit it all in. So hopefully the artist, when they start working, and I didn't throw a sample in here, but the penciler is first. So we have a writer. They write and describe and write the dialogue. That's given to the artist. The artist then pencils. and they're usually called a penciler. So they actually still work by hand. Some do work on the computer now. The Wacom tablets are awesome. But in our case, we actually had a penciler go through and pencil it. They scan it in, and these are done at 11 by 17. They are scaled down to 6.75 by 10.25. That's the standard comic book size. When it's trimmed, that's the size of a comic book. So we take 11 by 17, scale it down. Then a colorist comes in. That colorist brings it into Photoshop and actually does digital coloring, and that's what we're looking at here. Years ago, this was all done by hand. It was painted, it was watercolored, and then it was shot onto film. So instead, the colorist puts this all together. They get the file to the correct size. They save it as a Photoshop document with all the layers, and then they save it. Actually, I normally get the PSD file, and then I'll save this as a TIFF. I flatten it, convert to CMYK, save as a TIFF file, TIF, tagged image file format, and then we use compression, LZW compression, just to bring this down the file size. We never had any issues with these types of files. But then I'll take this file that we're looking at, and we're going to bring that into Illustrator to start laying down some of the text. So you can see here I have about 3 pages, page 8, and then page 10 as well. So this is what I work off of. Coming back in here, this is one of our finished artwork files. I can letter on top of pencils, and I can letter on top of inks. And I'm sorry, I did forget about the inks. Once this is scanned in as a pencil, sometimes before that's done, we have an inker come in with brush and ink, and they would actually ink it by hand. And the inked black and white is scanned in. Or it's scanned as pencils, and there are digital inkers now too. This book was digitally inked. So a penciler worked on it, scanned it in, someone else came in, a different artist, and inked it. And if you notice I didn't say trace. Inkers, that's an entire art into itself. It's not about just tracing the pencils and the other artwork. It is about bringing it to life. It's a very difficult job. Everyone thinks they can do it. Oh, I can ink over pencils. It is not easy to do. So once we have that all together, the colorist separates it out and colors it, and then I get those files. So let's take a look at Illustrator now. So we have the artwork. We have the script. Now, how do we bring that all together? How do we letter it? And so if I go back into Illustrator here, I opened up my sample comic book page, illustrator.ai. So artwork with bleed is 7 by 10.5. This gives you a 0.125 bleed all the way around when it's placed in the template. The document trim size is 6.75 by 10.25, and then the live area is 6.25 by 9.75. So that's the live area away from the margins. So if I go under my layers here, I can actually turn that off. I can throw it away. And I'll save this. I'll go into my lettering project. And I would normally save this into my working files. So I'm just going to call this test, because this is just a file we're going to be playing with. And I'll save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. Now you'll notice under my layers, I'm going to pull this up, I can get rid of this, of the text on this layer. Don't really need it anymore. And I have 2 layers. I have a lettering layer and a background, and there is a template layer. This is my guides, so I have the guides in here. So what I like to do is I'll jump onto my background layer, sorry about that, and I'll place it. So let's work on page 8. So I'm going to place my TIFF on page 8. Now you'll notice it is the correct size. So in Photoshop, those sizes we went over, it was placed, sorry, not placed, but the artwork was scaled to the correct size. And this artwork is 300 dpi, CMYK. And then what I like to do is I lock the layer. So now I can work right on top of it. So I'll start working with the lettering. Now I don't have a lot of text here. And what I'm going to do, just to speed things up, I'm going to show you the finished page in my working files. So I'll open up page 8 here. Doesn't look like much, So I have oh, whoosh, cops, that was close, arg, ha, get off my girl, I think that's what it said. But just to show you, I'm going to place that same file in here, and you'll see how we start working. So I'll drop the TIFF file in. And so you have a little bit better idea. Cops, oh. So what I'm going to do is recreate it. So our very first word balloon is her. So it says here, hot chick, panel 1. We have a SFX, our special effects, whoosh. So we got to do whoosh here, and we got to put a word balloon. So you got to make sure you're on your lettering. I'm going to zoom in. And I like to start with a fill and a stroke of 1. Fill white, stroke 1. I'm going to come in and grab my ellipse tool. And I'm going to create the balloon. Now she says O. So I'm going to grab my type tool and type out OH. Now I like to copy and paste normally. If this was a lot of text, which we'll do on another page, you notice I'm all caps. I'll like to copy and paste first. But we need to set one. So I typed it out. It came up with Myriad. And I have fonts that I like to use. Now these are specific comic book fonts. They are created just for lettering. Please, 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 please don't use Comic Sans. This is not a comic book font. I don't care what anyone says. No one ever uses Comic Sans. So we have some different fonts we can work with. And the font that I have that I'm working with is, just to double check, Jack Armstrong. So where do I find these fonts? So I'll select Jack Armstrong. And you'll notice we have an italic bold, a bold, and a normal. So this replicates handwriting, where we would go in and hand letter. There's lots and lots of different ones out there. And just to show you, we can start with Blambot. So if you do a Google search for Blambot, there's dialogue fonts. And this is a company that creates fonts specifically for comic books. There is some great information on this. So articles, art dimensions, all the things I'm talking about, even hand lettering. And this is something I learned a long time ago in Ames Lettering Guide. This is how it used to be done. And he goes through it all. There's some pencils and some inks. It's a really great website. Go take a look, search around. If you're teaching this, it's a great place to start. But I'm going to go to dialogue fonts. And any of the ones that are free, they're free for any independent comic or non-commercial use. So as you go through here, there's some really nice fonts in here, all kinds of different ones. Now I bought the one I'm using, but you can grab any of these and try. Like Back Issues, really nice old font. And I say old because of the Y and how things are set up a little bit here. But anything that has an F is free. If you want to pay for them, even better. Here's another one, Digital Strip 2. Really nice clean font. You can see it goes on and on and on. Lots and lots and lots of different hand-done fonts. I like that one there. Arthur Dent Awoke. So really nice font, clean. It's called Web Letter. But I'm going to stick with the one I have, which is Jack Armstrong. So you can grab any of these. And the standard font size that we use is actually around 6 point. And I know that's a little counterintuitive to some of you. You go, well, it's going to be tiny. You're not going to be able to see it. You'd be surprised. So if I do 6 point, that looks good. Now it's a little small for this case. She's going, oh. So I am going to bring this up just a little to 10. And that fits nicely inside. Now I may adjust my word balloon a little. Remember, you can use your open selection tool to grab just handles. and try to get this to fit nice. Always look at your margins. You want to make sure everything margins out nicely. So you have the equal space all the way around. You can see this isn't just draw a box or draw a balloon and be done with it. So there is her saying, oh. Now, I need to point to her. Maybe she's saying it. Well, how do I point to it? So we have our tail. I like to call them monkey tails, but it is the tail. So how do we draw the tail? Well, that's where the pen tool comes in. So I'll grab the pen tool. And what's nice is we do have a couple new tools in Illustrator, or newer tools, I should say. But these are the old standbys. So I want to point to her. So I'm going to have it come out, point to her, and come back. So what I do is I start with one point. I come down to where I want it and pull. So it gives me the curve. I click again, come back up, and there is my tail. So how do I merge these two together? Now I could use the Pathfinder tool. So if I go up under Window and I go to Pathfinder, I can then merge them together or unite them. Then I'd have to send to back. But what if I decide later on, ooh, I need to move this or get rid of the tail and point it over here? Well, I'd have to redraw everything. So the tool I like to use is when I have both selected, under the Pathfinder tool in the pull down, we have Make Compound Shape. So I select it, and you'll notice there's still two separate shapes, but they're together. So we'll send to back. And I do use my key commands usually for this, but I'm just showing you where these things are. So send backwards. And we now have her saying, oh, I can move this into position. Let's say I wanted to change this up a little. I can grab my open selection tool. And because it's a compound shape, I can move it within. And I can actually grab and change the anchors as well. So it's a little big. I can always change the font size down a little. Let's go to 8. And we'll back up. And there's our first word balloon. Now for special effects, a little bit tougher. And let's take a look. We've got a whoosh. So that's how he wants it. I'll grab it. And in this case, I'll type out whoosh. I'll paste it in, I mean. Now I picked up Jack Armstrong. And I have another font called Bada Boom. And this is from Blambot as well. You'll notice it's a very heavy font, but it has that comic book look to it. Now if I wanted this along the edge, I would have drawn out with the pen tool, maybe across the line, but we want to have it right in this area here. Just turning it on its side will probably be fine, and that looks good. I'll even bring the size down a little, holding down the Shift key. So that looks good. Now I want to put a stroke on this though. You'll notice I have a red fill, white stroke, black stroke. And I'll zoom in on that, sorry. So I want it to look like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is outline the text. Create outlines. And I'm going to do an ungroup. And there's a reason for that. I want to reset this font just a couple arrows at a time here. So it's not perfect. You'll notice I offset these just a little. I can even turn it just a little bit more, and we end up with the effect. So I'll group them back together, Command G or Object Group, and I'm going to copy. So this is the bottom of my strokes. We're going to end up with black, white, red fill. So I'm going to add a stroke to this. Whoop, a little too much. 4 is a little too much. Let's go to 3. I still want to see the O, the empty in the O. So 3. I'll paste in front, Command F, or Edit, paste in front, and then we'll add a stroke that's white. Maybe just 1 pixel. And I'm going to paste in front again. And this time I'm going to fill with red. So we end up with 3 parts here. We have one set of text with a 5-point stroke, 4-point black stroke. Then we paste it in front and put a 1-point stroke on the white, and then paste it in front again, and we get the whoosh. You can group this together. You can scale it. You can maybe even stretch it a little. There we go. And there's my whoosh. Now I don't have a lot of other copy on this page. A little bit here. Oh, we do have "that was close." So that was close. It's a thought balloon. So let's do a thought balloon real quickly. It's a lot like our standard one. So it's going to happen right in this area. So first thing I'm going to do is come in, grab my type tool, set it to black, and I'll paste it in. That was close. Oh, wrong font. So let's grab Jack Armstrong, 6-point. And we're going to be using the character palette here in a second. So right now, I need to break this down into how it's going to fit. And this is what takes a long time when lettering. I wish I could say it was easy, but you have to take the space that you have, back up a little. So we got to take the space that you have and get this to fit. So I'm going to align on center on paragraph. It's always aligned on center for comic books. There are some times when that changes, but for the most part, I'm going to put a return and another one. So I think this will fit the best. I got to try to make it fit within a circle. We are 6 over 7.2, and just to double check, I'm going to cheat a little here. I'm doing 6 over 7. So 6-point over 7-point leading. Tighten it up just a little bit. So that'll be my settings for my whole book. Once you get one done, most of the others just fall into place for size and everything else. So I'm going to do a white background with a black stroke. And I could do an option click, drag from center. And I'm going to get this to fit within the circle first. Just a little bit of time here using the opens. There we go. Might move this up just slightly. Now, I want to make it look like a bubble. So one of the easiest ways to do this is do a white fill with a black stroke. And using that option key, and I'm going to use the shift key too, I'm going to draw a bunch of circles around it. And if you remember a little while ago when we did the compound shape, we're going to use that to make our thought balloon. If you notice, I'm offsetting these a little just so they're not all the same. So I'll take my selection tool, grab everything, unselect the text, but I don't need it. Whoops. And I'm going to come up under my Pathfinder, make compound shape, arrange, send to back. And there's my thought balloon. So we'll move that back into place. And drop it in. And we're going to have 3 smaller circles, maybe even 2 in this case, go out and point to the character that was thinking that. So I would work my way through this. Page 8. Let's take a look at page 11. Now page 11 has a lot of dialogue. And you'll see here, without going through how to create all these one by one, I did the exact same thing I did before. I drew my circle, I put in my text, and here's a really good read. So going back to our, right here it says, "You're dead, kid, I never forget a face." Now I could have ran that all together into one word bubble, but instead I like to sit here and read it. So I'd say, "You're dead, kid," stop, start another word balloon, "I never forget a face. We're gonna find you," and it trails off. So anytime we see these underlines, and I make decisions while I'm lettering to emphasize other words. And this is a lot like William Shatner acting. There's a lot of pauses, and you emphasize specific words. And that's how I read this. And so I need to visually do that. And so in this case, we had "You're dead, kid." So "You're dead, kid." So instead of just having the type as normal, we use the bold. And in this case, we're starting with an I. So it is the person, I, never forget a face. So we use the capital here, not the lowercase. We use the barred version. So it's one of those little rules. And this is a compound shape. You can see it here. I can release it. So let's take a look at how this was built out. Release it one more time. So it's actually 3 parts. We have one balloon, I never forget a face, and the tail. So if I bring in and place it's page 11 here. Yeah, where they're talking to each other. Place that in. This needs to be scaled a little. There we go. Oop. We can start putting this together. So up here we have narration. It's just a box, but you'll notice I put a little bit of a gradient in it. This is a text balloon that's off camera or off panel. And you can see it's someone else talking to him. So we had it go off, touches the edge. So he's sorry about that. Here's a whole conversation that I've worked through. So I'm just giving you crap. Nice, cool. That guy with the wallet wanted me to thank you. And even here, I didn't have enough room to fit it all in, so I broke it up below, above, and below. And here's a real good example of a conversation. So, "Where are you going, kid?" "Home. I just got off work." "The train's that way." "I'll walk." So that's how we read it. Instead of doing separate balloons, we rolled it through. So it's a nice example of the lettering. I could go through this even more into all the little nitty-gritty on it, but there's some great tutorials out there. I also have another website I'm going to throw up here real quick. You can take a look at my work. This is all my comic book stuff. It's my last name, Glumace.com. But I also have another website called letteringcomics.com. And I did a workshop down at San Diego Comic Fest, and they're about 2 hours each. I go into much more detail how to create, and you can see here the different types of lettering all the way through. So lastly, I want to talk about production. So we've talked about writing. This is what we're looking at right now. We talked about the artwork. You have a penciler, an inker, and a colorist. Then the letterer gets the digital file. And sometimes the letterer is also the designer. And what I mean by that is putting the whole book together. And that's where Adobe Indesign comes into play. And so what I have here is a template that I provided you that's set up in Illustrator. I'm sorry, in InDesign. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save as, and we'll call it Final Layout. And I have my working files. So what I'm going to do is in my artwork, I'm going to do a file place. And we're going to place, we'll start with page 8 here. And I have to scale a little bit, sorry. When we did this book, our colorist did our pages up a little differently, but nothing bad. So we place the TIFF file. We'll lock it. Then on my lettering layer, I will do a file place. We'll drop page 8 in. Make sure it all fits. And it does. There we go. And we would add another page. I'll add one more. Actually, it's a spread. So I actually have a spread here. I didn't show it to you earlier, but page 9 and 10 is one big layout. Fight scene. If you notice, I'm on the wrong layer when I place this. So in InDesign, I can move the artwork back down, lock, and I'll place the lettering. Whoop, wrong page. So file place. And that all comes together. And we'll do that one last page with all the dialogue. Same thing, layers, turn off the artwork. We'll do a file place. And we'll place the last page here. That's the two of them talking again. So it's a dialogue heavy page is what we would call it. Nothing wrong with that. So it was good to have some dialogue in here. Lock it up, and I'll do a file place. There we go. So I now have, it's off a little bit. We'll just pretend it's fine. So then we save it, and we'll do an export. I usually deliver a PDF file, not just for the web, but also to the printer. So I'd save this as the interiors, PDF print, and depending on the settings, I might do my crop marks, talk to your printer, so it's best to find out what they want. I'm just going to do a press quality. And we now should have PDF file that is all put together. So we actually have a comic book here. Oh, something happened there. There we go. It's off a little bit, but nothing bad. Easy to fix. But that's the production process for pretty much a standard comic book. Now there might be little things here and there that are different. Like I said, I know some people use Photoshop documents instead of TIFF. Either one works. I use AI files instead of EPS files or encapsulated PostScript files now for all of my vector-based lettering. But in the end, as long as we get that nice PDF, it's 300 DPI, it's ready to go to print, then we did our job right. We also deliver PDFs to some of the online comic book stores as well, and those are set up just slightly different, but the artwork and everything else is still put together the same. Everything's written the same as well from the writing standpoint. So I hope you enjoyed this little glimpse into the workflow with comic books. It's a little bit more complex than just throwing everything together, but if you get the process down, you do things right, you can see it's pretty quick to get everything together once it's finished. So if you have any more questions, please hit up my site, which is at letteringcomics.com. Watch the videos, much longer. I go into depth into really how to do the production work, and I also have all the files and resources here too to download.